Okay, well, my first slide is going to show a very low-tech pie chart. And what that pie chart shows is generation of materials in California in 2018. And what you'll see is that we've generated about 77.6 million tons of materials in 2018, and 40% of that was recycled. Now that's down from the previous year, and we've had a downtrend since 2015. We continue to generate more and recycle slightly less. And when we look at that pie chart, what it shows is that the segment that's going towards exports is declining, and that's no surprise. About 14% total to exports. Of that total 14%, about 42% of that went to China. And I think I heard another presenter say earlier that years prior to that, maybe 2015 or 2016, about 62% of those total exports went to China. So we're seeing a significant decline in what's going to China, but still there is movement of our materials to other countries. The fact that we're recycling 40%, and of that 40%, 14% of that is still exported shows that the exports of recyclables is still an important part of our recycling infrastructure in California. The next slide is going to show a timeline that looks a lot like a snake, and it has a number of circles on it that represent the different policies that other countries have taken to restrict the import of recyclables, mainly since 2013 when China introduced green fence. 2017, National Sword came around, and then we saw a number of other copycat policies coming from Southeast Asian countries that were dealing with the inflow of the recyclables that had been going to China. So what that demonstrates is, and I want to just hit on a point that Andy had made previously, that we need to look at these export restrictions or import restrictions from other countries as an opportunity. What we're doing is we're greening the global recycling economy. For a long time, we were reliant on export markets without the accountability of really understanding what happened to the materials once they were exported to other countries. We know that mixed plastics often don't get processed as a whole. The bales are broken apart. The valuable materials are taken out. So when we were counting the export of those mixed plastic bales as recycling, we weren't being responsible in the sense that a number of those other resins could have been going to landfill, could have been polluting our oceans or polluting other places in our global markets. So Green Fence, National Sword, it's really an opportunity for us to figure out how can we export materials more responsibly, and how can we build up more infrastructure domestically for those materials. Do we think we're going to get the slideshow up, or should I just keep going? Okay, so if you're envisioning my timeline, the snake with a lot of circles on it, closer to current, we have a circle that has the Basel Convention, and that hasn't been mentioned yet. Mixed plastics and hard-to-recycle plastics were added to the Basel Convention. And what that means is countries that are part of that, U.S. currently isn't, but countries that are a part of that would have to approve the import of materials to those countries that fall under those categories, so mixed plastics or hard-to-recycle plastics. So that's just another way of controlling the movement of materials that are hard to recycle, and that goes into effect in 2021. We've been hearing a lot about other bans, other import restrictions coming down the pipeline, potentially a full fiber ban to China, et cetera. And what this tells us, so when you're looking at this timeline with all these circles and all these changes in policies, what that tells us is there's a lack of sustainability overall in our exports markets. They'll remain there, but they're unpredictable, and it's going to be hard for us to know how these materials will flow, what the value of those materials will be, and how much we should be relying on them in California, in Los Angeles overall, as recipients of our materials. Okay, so just to orient myself here, my next slide will show a number of bar charts. And in those bar charts, they're broken down by different commodity types. And there's years at the bottom of them. And it shows the change of flow of materials to all other countries besides the United States, I think since about 2014. And what you'll see is that mixed paper has practically gone from a substantial amount to zero. The yellow bar at the very top is mixed plastics, and as you can see, that's almost completely crashed as far as exports go. The orange bit is cardboard. And cardboard has stayed relatively stable. In fact, 2018 had our highest numbers of, our highest tonnage of exports since we'd been recording the export of materials. There was a little bit of a drop in 2019, but we're still seeing a lot of movement for that. And for this presentation, we hadn't previously looked at this. We included other miscellaneous mixed paper. Now, all of this data comes from a Wiser Trade database, and one of the main components of other miscellaneous mixed paper is pulp. And we're seeing more movement of pulp internationally right now because there's a market for pulp. Pulp tends to be cleaner than what we were seeing in mixed paper. So this is one way. There aren't pulpers in California right now, but this is one way that we could expand our infrastructure to create a product that's cleaner that other countries could take or that neighboring states could take for processing. So along with the drop in the export of recyclable materials, we're also seeing a drop in scrap value that has impacted industry significantly. The two lines here are cardboard in blue and mixed paper in orange. And as you can see, mixed paper is very, very low. In fact, the cost of transportation gives it a negative scrap value. And you can see cardboard has dropped. Now, this is a relatively short timeline. This is January 18 to January 20. And I wanted you to see the volatility in these markets in that short timeline. But what you are seeing is a little uptick for cardboard in 2020. So there is an opportunity for cardboard to recover, maybe not to the $160 a ton that it has been, $180 a ton that it has been. But as the markets are starting to stabilize a little bit more, we are seeing it recover a bit. What's not on here is mixed plastics, and once again, just want to bring them up because they're an important material that we've all been talking about today. Negative scrap value, not much moving anymore overseas, so just an opportunity for us to think about those materials differently. So market development. When we think about market development at CalRecycle, we're thinking about it in three strategies right now. The first is to maintain our current domestic markets. We do have some great markets here in California. One notable one is PET. So prior to the Bottle Bill program, we were exporting about 95% of our PET. When Bottle Bill came forward in the development of the Plastic Market Development Program, PMDP, where we were paying incentives for manufacturing of PET products here, from that time, we now only export about half of our PET, which means we have domestic capacity to remanufacture about 50% of that. So we have opportunity to build these domestic markets in California for those materials that it's possible for us to build those markets for. And for those materials that we can't build those markets for, or there's only a percentage of those markets that we can fulfill, it's important that we still maintain some of these responsible export markets. So when we know materials are going to other countries and they're responsibly managed, and that, once again, is the trend that we're seeing with these different policies that are coming down from other countries as to what they're importing. There's a lot of momentum around cleaning up the global recycling system, so maintaining those responsible export markets is key. And then the third part, which is one that we're really interested in exploring more currently, is expanding new domestic markets. And this is both here, within California, and also in our neighboring states and regions. So getting into a little bit more detail on these, we have the recycling numbers that we have in California because of the infrastructure that we've built here. We're at a 40% recycling rate. We'd like to be a lot higher. You all are probably familiar with our 75% recycling rate by 2020. Spoiler, we didn't reach it. I guess that's not a spoiler because it is 2020 and we didn't reach it. But we're still encouraged that we can with some of the legislation that we're implementing now and some new legislation that might be coming down. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And with our beverage container recycling program, now beverage containers are only 2% of the waste stream, but we do have a 76% recycling rate. And that's largely because of the infrastructure that we've built up around the Bottle Bill program. So there's really strong collect and sort infrastructure in California. And we can continue to build that infrastructure, particularly as it comes to the manufacturing piece. A lot of talk about the importance of reducing contamination today and the different ways to do that. We've seen investments in our MRFs to bring in new equipment, to hire more sorters, to clean up what's going into the bales so that that material is marketable. There's interest in investing in more secondary MRFs in California, and then regionally coordinated education and outreach. You know, there's a lot of differences locally around what goes into the blue bin, and that's okay because programs have to be different to work, but there really needs to be clear education as to what is accepted, what isn't accepted, what to do when those sorts of things change, and when there's opportunities to harmonize that messaging. You know, maybe statewide we could do more on the contamination messaging. So there are those opportunities. It's identifying them and making sure that we're getting out ahead so that the recyclers in our communities know what it is that they need to do to contribute to a cleaner recycling system. Maintain international export markets. So I've talked quite a bit about this, just seeing if there's anything new on here. Oh, so one important piece is that global recycled PET demand is outpacing supply, and this is largely due to a lot of the commitments from brands to be using more recycled content, and also more legislation in other countries and other places that has these minimum recycled content standards. So we want to keep producing as many clean bales as we can and getting them to those markets because that will drive the need for more and more of this material. Clean and separated fiber and plastic remain desirable internationally. We know this, so just continuing to invest in cleaning the infrastructure, or cleaning the materials. And then expanding domestic and regional markets. There's a number of new plastic manufacturers coming into the state of California that are utilizing recycled content primarily. Peninsula Plastics has just expanded to accept 1 through 7s. Our Planet Earth has expanded to a plant in Vernon to accept more PET and PET thermoforms. So there's more and more of this capacity coming online. What we've seen with these new facilities is over 82,000 tons per year of in-state capacity and 50,000 tons per year in Nevada. So we see this is a growing industry. Recycled paper capacity is growing in the U.S. This really isn't in California yet, but it is in our neighboring states, so Pacific Northwest primarily. The question is it cost effective for us to be able to transport that material to those markets? And if not, are there California solutions? What are those domestic solutions for processing paper? And maybe it is something like pulping. Maybe it's something else, but something for us to continue to coordinate and think about. And then to increase regional coordination with neighboring countries. We're currently sending, I think, about 8% of our paper to Mexico. There could potentially be more capacity to process paper there or to do other manufacturing that would help us continue to build the regional relationships to process these materials that we're generating. I wanted to talk a little bit about state investments. The state does have a number of different programs that invest in manufacturing technology for recycled materials as well as building recycling systems throughout the state. It's not all-encompassing. There's also investments by the private sectors and others that's needed in order for us to have or to envision this robust recycling and manufacturing capacity in California. We have our greenhouse gas reduction funds grants. Those are fiber plastic glass grants, organics grants, et cetera. We've invested over about $100 million since the inception of that program, and I believe our RFPs for the organics grant program and the fiber plastic and glass will be coming out this summer. We have our Recycling Market Development Zone loans, RMDZ loans, which are loans that go towards businesses that are diverting materials from landfill in order to make new products. Just announced in the governor's budget is a climate catalyst fund. We don't know a whole lot about it yet. We do know that it should be about $1 billion over 4 years, $250 million the first year. It'll be a revolving loan fund with low to no interest rates. And there's 3 categories that are outlined in the governor's budget that of businesses that would be eligible for these funds, and one of those is circular economy. So we've heard that word quite a bit today, and hopefully we'll be working with the governor's office and others on helping to identify what kind of projects would be good entities to receive this kind of funding. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to send them my way as we're shaping what this program could look like. Another investment is some bottle bill pilot programs. The bottle bill is really hot right now. It's in the news daily, and a lot of talk on how to fix convenience. As you know, there were a number of recycling center closures throughout the state that impacted the ability for people to return their bottles and cans to get their 5-cent and 10-cent redemption. So what these pilots do is they're looking at ways to modernize convenience in the state. We've awarded 2, one to Culver City and one to San Francisco, and what we'll be looking at in those jurisdictions are opportunities for mobile redemption is one example, and also a bag drop model, which is a model that's done through other states and internationally. And we'll be awarding 3 more pilots, so there'll be 5 in this first year. And then the last thing is a statewide education campaign. There's been a lot of talk today about the importance for us to make sure that the Californians that want to recycle or want to reduce their generation of materials have the strategies, know how to do it, know where to look. So we're investing $15 million over 3 years on a statewide campaign to try to figure out what that message is, how to harmonize that message so that Californians, once again, can understand what goes into that blue bin, how to reduce contamination, opportunities for source reduction, et cetera. And then we're implementing some legislation right now. I'm sure most of you are familiar with SB 1383. The charge is to remove 75% of organics or divert 75% of organics from landfill by 2025. And the definition of organics is different than previous statewide definitions of organics. For the first time, it includes fiber and paper. And this is because 1383 is a bill that's focused in on reducing short-lived climate pollutants. Methane, as you all know, is a very, very potent greenhouse gas. And in order to reduce the methane coming from landfill, we have to remove all of those organic materials that are responsible for producing that gas. So fiber is one of them. So in 1383 implementation, what's going to be really important for us to be able to divert that paper from landfill is to make sure that it's clean. So there'll be opportunities within 1383 once it's implemented to produce cleaner fiber bales and look towards those solutions to having that material be cleaner. SB 1335 is, the rulemaking is in process right now. I believe we're just starting the formal, and that requires, so it's kind of narrow in scope and won't hit a lot of products, but it's important. So what it requires is that all state facilities that have food service serve food in recyclable, compostable, or reusable food service containers. And it gives the department the authority to, for the first time, to define recyclable. So in our draft regulations, we have those definitions for recyclable, compostable, and reusable. And what's important there is in our definition of recyclable, the material that's being used for the food service packaging has to be able to be separated out into a single material bale. And this is from the plastic side. Because when materials are separated out like that, they're sold and then the thinking behind it is that they're sold and then turned into a new product. So that's a way to get at recyclability. So keep an eye on that. Once again, we're starting the formal regulatory process, so there's an opportunity to engage on those definitions, because that could potentially influence some legislation that's coming down the pipeline as we're thinking about recyclability as a whole. And then the final thing I wanted to mention as far as implementation of new laws is the AB 1583 Commission. Now, CalRecycle is currently in the process of standing up a commission, and this commission is going to be charged with providing policy recommendations to the department on curbside recycling and market development and markets as a whole. So we have to have our first meeting of the commission by July 1st, so we're hoping to have it appointed by April at the latest so that we can stand up a meeting relatively soon thereafter. And the commission's charge is to deliver these recommendations to the department by January 1, 21. So it's a relatively quick process, but it'll be helpful to have stakeholders engage in a process to help us look at things differently and influence policy moving forward at the state level. SB 54, AB 1080 has been talked about quite a bit today. In the case that it hadn't, I just wanted to provide a slide. If this passes, it'll be as big, if not bigger, than 1383 as far as a shift in how materials are managed in the state. And I won't go into too much detail right now, but It hits on a lot of the policies that were discussed earlier today. It'll get us at a place of looking at packaging differently. Packaging is currently 25% of the waste stream, and it's something that we largely don't have the authority to move the needle on as much as we would like at the state level. So SB 54, AB 1080 provides that in that all packaging coming into California by 2030 would have to be recyclable and compostable, and those material types that are being used would have to be at a 75% recycling rate. So very lofty goals, but very exciting for really moving the way that we look at these materials. And just in closing, I always like to show this graph. What this shows is the relationship between the economy and generation. So what we always see is that when the economy is good, we generate more materials. And that doesn't have to be the case. I haven't talked much about source reduction today, but source reduction is a key component and needs to be the first thing that we think about when we're talking about how to better manage materials in California. And we can decouple these things and still be successful. We've talked a lot today about the importance of infrastructure development, the importance of keeping our materials clean, but I think together, working with industry, working with local governments, et cetera, we can get to a place where we have stronger source reduction policy, require that the materials coming into California harmonize with our systems better, and have proper end-of-life management for all of those materials so that we can get to our lofty zero waste goals, our 75% recycling goals, and meet our climate challenges. All right, thank you.